Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about the post-workout anabolic window and how we kind of update this with the modern times. So let me put on my +5 out of weaponsmithing, work on skilling at my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this because this is something that I talked about in the past, actually even 5 years ago here on YouTube, that the data on the anabolic window thing always was only done on people who were fasted, right? And a lot of people weren't aware of that. They would say, hey, we've got all these studies showing that post-workout shakes, recovery shakes, dextrose added to whey, all these different concoctions, that they produced a net increase in muscle protein synthesis if taken immediately post-workout, right? And everyone looked at all this data and said, oh yeah, this is great, look at this, oh, this is important. And before long, we had companies cashing in on that. But what people were not made aware of originally was that all the data was done on people who were fasted. And that shouldn't even surprise anybody. That's actually not even really trickery. The early data looking at this, if you think about it, from a medical perspective or a nutrition perspective, makes sense. Because when we do blood work, when blood work is done on people, right? And when I say we, I don't mean me personally. I don't draw blood in a doctor's office. But you guys know what I mean by we. Western society, modern medicine, all of that stuff, right? When you go to your medical doctor to have blood work done in the morning or they test things, what do they have you do? They have you fast overnight. You get a fasted blood glucose, right? You get your fasting lipid profile. You get sometimes even your testosterone levels and stuff taken. It's always fasted. Why? Because it puts a control in place so that we have a standardization. Because if people ate breakfast first, we would actually need a different set of standards depending upon what they ate. So people who choose to eat bacon and eggs versus people who choose to eat a sugary cereal with milk and a banana versus people who choose to eat Greek yogurt and oats, we would actually need a completely different set of numbers for them, right? They would have a different ideal fasting glucose. They would have a different ideal triglyceride level. The numbers would be changed depending upon specifically what you ate for breakfast. There would be no standard. The fasting puts a control in place so that you can compare different populations and health markers in the same nutritional setting. They've all fasted overnight. They've been at least 12 hours without food, without calories, right? All they've had is water. In some cases, they'll tell you black coffee might be okay, depending upon the doctor. Different doctors give you different orders, right? So it shouldn't come as any surprise if they wanted to test food that they did that, because what do we do with glycemic index? How does the glycemic index measured? Fasted. In other words, when they tell you what the glycemic index of a food is, that was tested in someone who ate it for breakfast after an overnight fast. That's where they get the number. Here's the problem. When you eat food first, it changes all these things. It changes insulin response. It changes blood sugar response, right? That's one reason it plays complete havoc on blood sugar tests to look for pre-diabetes and hypoglycemia and diabetes and all this stuff, right? That's why they have you do it fasted, because the food itself plays havoc with those numbers. Well, what do you think happens if you eat breakfast before you train? It affects your training. It affects what's going on after you train, because during your training itself, your digestion usually stops. Because the blood flow towards your stomach has been largely reduced. When you are training, where's the blood needed? The blood is needed in your muscles. It doesn't go towards your GI tract for the most part. It is going towards your muscles. Digestion slows down. Absorption rates slow down. Like your stomach quits churning as much. Your intestines quit absorbing as much. So it'll actually, loading that up is actually a negative. And if anything, what you're consuming during a workout might actually hurt your workout in some cases, because again, it puts your GI tract back into action. So the whole idea here is that it affects it. So of course they tested it fasted. How else would they have a control in place? The only other way they could have tested it non-fasted is if they have everyone eat the same breakfast before they come into the lab, right? Right? Otherwise they don't have a control in place. So they tested it fasted, and of course it worked. If you have just lifted weights completely fasted, getting amino acids and glucose into your system as quickly as possible is going to impact muscle protein synthesis. It is going to affect muscle growth because you're fasted, you're depleted, you have nothing to rebuild muscle tissue on, you have nothing to shuttle nutrients into them. You don't have extra IGF-1 and insulin and everything else circulating. All these anabolic hormones are not there. So, of course, it works. But what's been ironic is that all these companies produced all these different products to help with this, right? They produced all these different products. And the ironic part is that another study was done on it, and it found that just regular old chocolate milk bought off the shelf, in some cases, produced superior results to the stuff that the supplement companies were making post-workout for replenishing glycogen, for boosting muscle protein synthesis, all these things. Why? Because it was more complete food, because it had all the stuff in milk. And you talk about something that's going to make you grow. Look at milk. Look at the protein, two different types of protein. Simple carbohydrates, magnesium, calcium, potassium, all this stuff that we need to hydrate muscles is there. Then you throw chocolate in, and then we get a larger insulin response. Like if you throw the chocolate and the sugar in on top of it, larger insulin response, because lactose actually doesn't have that large of an insulin response, even though it's a simple sugar, right? So they found that chocolate milk worked wonders. Extremely anabolic post-workout. But again, this was people who were fasted. So when you look at all that, it started to become kind of silly that people focused on this anabolic window. And what they found was that people who ate breakfast before they trained, the anabolic window extended out to about 8 hours. In other words, as long as you got sufficient protein and sufficient carbohydrates to replenish the glycogen, and at least something like 40 grams of protein after a workout, within 8 hours of finishing the workout, if you ate a complete meal beforehand at some point, it produced the exact same response that a post-workout recovery shake did. In other words, the net muscle protein synthesis, the net muscle glycogen content, all of this stuff ended up being the same. It ended up being the same. Well, now we have to come around full circle because people are training fasted again, aren't they? What's ironic, I used to joke about that because I'm like, nobody trains fasted. Nobody trains fasted, so this whole anabolic window, these studies on it are actually turned out to be kind of useless. They've been used just to sell post-workout shakes. Well, the ironic part is that people are training fasted again. They're doing it for body composition, for fat loss, for caloric management. Hell, I started messing with it this week based upon looking at stuff that my bro Nico was talking about. Looking at stuff like Birkin and people are talking about. As far as just caloric control, if you want to continue to eat the same size meals you were eating when you're bulking, skipping breakfast is a real good idea, right? You can cut out like a 20-30% of your calories for the day just by eating the same size meals you were having for lunch and dinner and everything, just by not eating till noon, which, you know, for most of us, that oftentimes results in fasted training. So then some of us are training fasted. And actually, I found it to work pretty well. I found it to work pretty well this week. And I have done fasting off and on for cutting, but generally not on my training days. I don't train fasted. But I'm finding with the workloads I'm doing right now, because I'm only doing, about 13 actual work sets, like 13 real work sets on my big compounds, right? That's not that much. For one workout, that's not enormous. And they're moderate reps. They're not real high reps. So it works out just fine, doesn't it? When I'm working in the 5 to 8 rep range for the most part, that's not an enormous glycogen need. So it's actually working just fine for fasted training. But then this is where this data comes in handy, doesn't it? If people are going to train fasted, well, post-workout recovery does kind of become important. Now, people will say, well, what are you doing special? What's magical? Well, I'm not doing anything special. I just take my protein shake and my creatine immediately after I finish my last set. Since I train at home, it's not a big deal, and then I eat a normal meal right after. I let that get in. I spend about 30 minutes letting that soak in, right? And then I eat some real food. So yesterday, or the last time, I don't even know. Yeah, it wasn't even yesterday. It's hard to keep up. I film these videos on different days for my actual uploading, and a lot of people don't know that. A lot of these videos you're seeing might have been filmed 3 days, 2 days, who knows how many days before I upload it. Because I tend to do sometimes 7 or 8 videos in a day, and then, you know, only do one video the next day and the day after. I tend to do a lot of stuff like that. So I think it was 2 days ago, because this is Sunday that I'm actually filming this. So on the Friday, I did that, and then I had some brown rice and some chicken breast and some broccoli. So yeah, it was very bro day. Very bro day. But that's what I did, and I think there is something to be said for this. This stuff does matter. The anabolic window is going to matter, I guess, if you're going to train fasted. And a lot of people are training fasted now. It's becoming a little more popular. Not that it's magical. It's not magical fat loss, guys. I don't want anyone to think that. But it is a form of caloric management, right? It's a good caloric management tool. It's good for diet adherence, and that's ultimately the reason I'm doing it personally. And I would assume anyone who's educated on the matter, that's why they're doing it. It's just diet adherence, and it does allow you to eat normal-sized meals and portions in the evening, so you can go to bed full, and you only deal with the hunger early in the day. Right? You only deal with the hunger early in the day. And I think most of us, even those of us with voracious appetites, we can get away with being hungry for 4 or 5 hours. We're okay with being hungry for 4 or 5 hours. We just don't want to be hungry for 16 hours, you know, and that's the difference. Like I can stave it off till noon, till 1 o'clock, and then go ahead and eat. So that's the reason I'm personally doing it. But I think it could be beneficial in this case if we do go back and look at some of the data. It does show maybe a faster absorbing protein, some creatine, stuff like that. Probably not a bad idea immediately after you train if you're going to train fasted, which is what the original data on post-workout recovery shakes was done on. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.